I showed up to a job interview at 9 a.m. sharp, dressed in my best suit, resume printed on expensive paper. But when I arrived at the address, the building was empty. Completely empty. The lobby was dark, the doors were locked, and there was no sign of any company. I was standing there, confused and frustrated, when an old janitor appeared with a ring of keys. "You here for an interview?" he asked with a knowing smile. I nodded, bewildered. He unlocked the door. "Happens every now and then," he said. "People show up here when they're at a crossroad. Come on in. I'll put some tea on." Before we dive in, have you ever found wisdom in the most unexpected place? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you love stories about life-changing conversations, finding clarity, and unexpected teachers, please subscribe so you don't miss our next one. Now let me take you back to the morning I went to an interview that didn't exist. Four months ago, I had been laid off from my job as a marketing coordinator at a mid-size agency. Not because I'd done anything wrong, just corporate restructuring, budget cuts, the usual story. 15 people let go in a single day, all of us handed severance packages and escorted out by noon. Since then, I'd sent out maybe 200 applications. I'd had a dozen interviews. Nothing had materialized. My savings were nearly gone. I'd stopped being picky. At first, I'd only applied to jobs I actually wanted, positions that seemed interesting, companies with good reputations, roles that might lead somewhere meaningful. But as the weeks dragged on and the rejections piled up, I had started applying to everything. Jobs I was overqualified for, jobs I had no interest in, jobs that seemed soul-crushing, but paid. I just needed something. Anything. So when I received an email on Monday afternoon with the subject line, "Interview Opportunity," I didn't hesitate. The email was brief and professional. "Dear Mr. Cross, we came across your resume and were impressed with your background in marketing and content strategy. We would like to invite you to interview for the position of Director of Creative Strategy at Atlas Solutions. Tuesday, April 18th, 9 a.m., 427 Weston Avenue, Suite 800. We look forward to meeting you. Best regards, Atlas Solutions Hiring Team." I didn't remember applying to Atlas Solutions, but I'd sent out so many applications in the past 4 months that they all blurred together. And the position sounded good. Director of Creative Strategy was a step up from what I'd been doing, with presumably better pay. I researched the company that evening, but found almost nothing. A few vague mentions in old business directories, but no website, no social media presence, no recent news. That was strange, but not unprecedented. Some companies kept low profiles. I prepared like I would for any interview. I printed fresh copies of my resume, I rehearsed answers to common questions, I picked out my best suit, the navy one that made me look more successful than I felt. Tuesday morning, I left my apartment at 7:30 to make sure I'd arrive early. The address took me to an older part of the city I rarely visited, a neighborhood of mid-century commercial buildings that had seen better days, interspersed with newer development that hadn't quite revitalized the area. 427 Weston Avenue was a 9-story building with an Art Deco facade that must have been beautiful in the 1950s, but now just looked tired. The windows were dark, the small plaza in front had dead plants and concrete planters. I checked the address 3 times. This was definitely it. I tried the front door. Locked. I peered through the glass into the lobby. Dark, empty, no reception desk visible. Just a dusty floor and a bank of elevators that probably didn't work. My stomach sank. Had I gotten the address wrong? I pulled out my phone and checked the email again.
427 Weston Avenue, Suite 800. This was the right place. But there was clearly no company here. No Atlas Solutions. Possibly no companies at all. I stood there on the sidewalk, feeling like an idiot in my expensive suit, holding my leather portfolio with resumes I wouldn't be handing to anyone. 4 months of unemployment, hundreds of applications, and I'd shown up to an interview at a building that was apparently abandoned. Perfect. Just perfect. I was about to leave, to go home, change out of this suit, and spend the rest of the day feeling sorry for myself, when I heard a voice behind me. "You here for an interview?" I turned. An elderly man, probably in his early 70s, was standing there with a large ring of keys. He wore a gray janitor's uniform with a name tag that said Frank. He had white hair, kind eyes, and a slight smile like he was in on a joke I didn't understand. Yes, but I think there's been a mistake. The company I was supposed to interview with doesn't seem to be here." "Atlas Solutions?" Frank asked. "Yes. Do you know them? Did they move?" Frank unlocked the front door, a heavy glass door that swung open with a creak. "They closed about 5 years ago. Building's been mostly empty since then. Scheduled for demolition in a couple months, actually." "Then why?" I stared at my phone, at the email. Someone sent me an interview invitation? "Happens every now and then," Frank said, holding the door open. "People show up here for interviews with companies that don't exist anymore. Always people who look a little lost, if you don't mind me saying. People at Crossroads." "I don't understand." "Neither do I, fully, but I've worked here for 12 years, and I've learned to recognize it. Someone shows up, confused, looking for something they're not going to find. And I've learned that when that happens, the kind thing to do is invite them in for tea and a conversation. You interested?" Every rational part of my brain said to leave. This was weird. This man was a stranger. I had things to do, more applications to send, more rejection emails to read. But something about Frank's manner, the kindness in his eyes, the lack of judgment, the strange certainty with which he spoke made me curious. "Okay, sure, why not?" I followed Frank into the dark lobby. He flipped some switches and old fluorescent lights flickered to life, casting harsh light on a space that had clearly been beautiful once. The lobby had marble floors and Art Deco details, but everything was covered in dust. There was a directory board on the wall listing companies, all with suite numbers, all clearly outdated. "The elevator's still working," Frank said, pressing the call button. "Building still got power, still got water. They keep it maintained until the demolition. I'm the only one here most days, just making sure pipes don't freeze, keeping an eye on things." We rode the elevator to the 3rd floor. Frank led me down a hallway of empty offices, doors open, revealing spaces stripped of furniture, just carpet and walls, and the ghosts of whatever businesses had been there. At the end of the hall was a small office, clearly Frank's office. It was surprisingly cozy. There was a desk, a comfortable chair, several bookshelves packed with books, photos on the walls, a small electric kettle, and mugs hanging on hooks. "Have a seat," Frank said, gesturing to a worn armchair in the corner. "I'll make tea." "You drink tea?" "Sure." While Frank prepared the tea, I looked around. The photos on the walls showed the building in its heyday, black and white images from what looked like the 1950s and 60s, showing the lobby full of people, offices buzzing with activity. There were also more recent photos, Frank with various people, all smiling, all seemingly in this same office. "Milk, sugar?" Frank asked. "Just milk, thanks." He handed me a mug of tea and settled into the chair behind his desk. "So, Joseph, tell me about yourself. Not your resume. I'm sure that's very impressive. Tell me about your life, right now. What's going on?" It was such a direct, simple question that I didn't know how to answer it with the usual interview platitudes. I was laid off 4 months ago. I've been looking for work since then, applying to everything,
getting nowhere. I'm running out of money and running out of options. I got this email about an interview, and I showed up because I'm desperate." Frank nodded, sipping his tea. "What kind of work were you doing?" "Marketing, content strategy, social media management, that kind of thing. For tech companies mostly." "Did you like it?" The question caught me off guard. I was good at it. "That's not what I asked." I thought about it. No, I didn't like it. But it paid well. It was stable. It was what I was supposed to do. Supposed to, according to whom? I don't know. Society? My parents? Myself, I guess. I have a degree in communications. Marketing was the logical career path. It made sense. Making sense and making you happy aren't always the same thing, Frank said gently. No, but happiness doesn't pay rent. True enough. But let me ask you something, Joseph. You've been unemployed for 4 months, applying for jobs you don't want, getting rejected from positions that wouldn't have made you happy anyway. What exactly are you looking for? A job, money, stability. Those are means, not ends. What are you actually looking for? I didn't have an answer. Frank smiled. It's okay not to know. Most people don't. They spend their whole lives chasing things they think they're supposed to want. Good jobs, impressive titles, nice salaries, without ever asking if those things will actually make them feel alive. You sound like you're speaking from experience. I am. I worked in marketing for 40 years. Climbed the corporate ladder, had a corner office, a 6-figure salary, a title that impressed people at parties. I was successful by every conventional measure. What happened? I had a heart attack when I was 60. Woke up in a hospital bed thinking I was going to die. And my first thought wasn't about my career or my accomplishments or my retirement account. It was, I've wasted my life doing things that don't matter. Frank's eyes were distant, remembering. I recovered, obviously, but something changed. I couldn't go back to that life, to that office, to pretending that quarterly earnings and marketing campaigns were important to me. So I quit, took the pension, walked away. And I became a janitor. A janitor? Worst financial decision I ever made. Best life decision. Because for the first time in 60 years, I was living honestly. No pretending, no chasing status, just showing up, doing simple work, having real conversations with people. Like this one. I sipped my tea, processing this. But don't you have regrets? All those years building a career and you just walked away? Of course I have regrets. I regret that it took me 60 years and a heart attack to figure out what mattered. I regret the relationships I neglected while chasing promotions. I regret the experiences I missed because I was always working. But I don't regret leaving. That's the difference. So you're saying I should quit looking for marketing jobs and become a janitor? Frank laughed. I'm not saying anything prescriptive. I'm just telling you my story. You have to figure out your own. But Joseph, can I ask you something? Are you looking for a job or are you looking for a purpose? Because those are very different things. And if it's purpose you're after, you're not going to find it by sending out 200 resumes for jobs you don't care about. The words hit harder than I expected. Because he was right. I'd been so focused on finding any job, getting any offer, that I hadn't asked myself what I actually wanted my life to be. I don't know what my purpose is, I admitted quietly.
That's okay, but you won't figure it out by staying busy applying for jobs you don't want. Sometimes you need to stop, sit in the discomfort of not knowing, and let the answer come to you. We talked for another hour. Frank asked questions I'd never been asked in any interview. Questions about what made me feel alive, about moments when I'd felt most myself, about what I'd do if money weren't an issue. I found myself telling him things I'd never articulated to anyone. That I'd always wanted to write, not marketing copy, but real writing, stories and essays that mattered. That I'd chosen communications as a major because it seemed practical, but that I'd actually wanted to study literature. That I'd taken the first marketing job I was offered because I was scared of not having a path, but that I'd felt increasingly hollow with each passing year. "Why did you stop writing?" Frank asked. "Because only a few people make a living as a writer, because it isn't realistic, because I had student loans and rent and responsibilities." All true. But Joseph, you've been living realistically for what, 7 years now? Has it made you happy? No. Then maybe realistic isn't the right goal. Maybe meaningful is. After a while, Frank offered to show me the building. "Come on, I want you to see something." We left his office and walked through the empty floors. Frank narrated as we went, pointing out where different companies had been. Fifth floor was an advertising agency. They did brilliant work in the 70s and 80s, went under when digital advertising took over and they couldn't adapt. Seventh floor was a law firm, very prestigious. All the lawyers worked 80-hour weeks, made partner, had heart attacks in their 50s. Third floor, right below my office, was Atlas Solutions. They did corporate consulting, helped companies optimize efficiency. They were here for 15 years. Then one day the CEO realized he had spent his entire adult life helping other companies make money and had no idea what his life was for. He dissolved the company, gave everyone a year's severance, and moved to a monastery in Tibet. Seriously? Seriously. I met him before he left. He was the happiest I had ever seen him. We took the elevator to the 9th floor, the top floor, and Frank led me through some doors to a space I hadn't expected, a rooftop terrace. It was overgrown with weeds now, the furniture long gone, but the view was spectacular. You could see most of the city from up here, the downtown skyline in the distance, the neighborhood spreading out in all directions. I come up here sometimes to remember perspective. When you're down there, he pointed to the street far below, everything seems urgent, critical. You're rushing to meetings, chasing deadlines, worried about impressions and evaluations, and whether you're succeeding. But from up here, you can see how temporary it all is, how small. We stood in silence for a while, looking at the city.
"This building was built in 1952, Frank said eventually. "Hundreds of companies have occupied these offices over the decades. Thousands of people have worked here. Every single one of them thought what they were doing was crucially important. And you know what remains? Nothing. The building is being torn down in 2 months. All those companies are gone. All those urgent meetings and critical deadlines and make-or-break projects, they're just dust now. That's depressing." Is it? I find it liberating, because it means the only thing that actually matters is how you spend your time, not what you accomplish or what title you have or how much money you make, just whether you're living in a way that feels true to who you are. He turned to look at me. "Joseph, you came here today looking for a job at a company that doesn't exist, and I don't think that's an accident. I think something in you needed to stop chasing what you think you're supposed to want and start asking what you actually want. This building, this empty building full of the ghosts of corporations and careers, it's a good place to do that." We went back downstairs to Frank's office. I checked my phone. I'd been here for nearly 3 hours. 3 hours I could have spent sending applications, networking, doing all the things unemployed people are supposed to do. But I felt more clear-headed than I had in months. "Frank, this is going to sound crazy, but who sent me that email? How did I end up here?" Frank smiled that knowing smile again. "I have a theory. This building has been here for 70 years.
Thousands of people have passed through, all looking for something. Success, security, validation. I think maybe the building has a kind of memory, and every so often when someone's at a crossroads, something calls them here. Some people would say that's impossible, but I've been here 12 years and I've seen it happen enough times that I've stopped questioning it. So, you think, what, the building sent me that email? I think maybe you sent yourself that email, somehow. Maybe you applied to Atlas Solutions years ago when they still existed, and some automated system has been running in the background ever since. Maybe you unconsciously remembered this address and your mind invented a reason to come here. Or maybe it's something stranger. Does it matter? He was right. It didn't matter. What mattered was that I'd come here, and I'd had this conversation, and something had shifted. Frank, can I ask you something? What do I do now? I still need a job. I still have rent to pay. I can't just stop looking for work and hope purpose finds me. No, you can't. But you can stop looking for work that deadens your soul. You can start asking yourself what kind of work might actually mean something to you. And you can give yourself permission to pursue that, even if it's scary. He pulled out a business card, actual business card, which seemed charmingly old-fashioned, and handed it to me. There's a nonprofit organization I volunteer with sometimes. They do literacy programs and creative writing workshops for underserved communities. They're looking for a content editor, someone to manage their website, write their newsletters, help tell their stories. It doesn't pay much, probably half what you were making before, but it's meaningful work, and they need someone with your skills. I looked at the card. You think I should apply? I think you should stop applying for things you don't want and start pursuing things you do want, even if they're impractical, even if they don't fit the plan you thought you had. I stayed with Frank for another hour. We talked about his life, about the building, about the people he'd met over the years who'd shown up for interviews at companies that didn't exist. You said I'm not the only one this has happened? I asked. There have been others, not many, maybe one or two a year, but they all have a similar look when they arrive. Lost, desperate, and they all leave different than they came. What happened to them? Different things. One woman quit her law career and became a yoga instructor. One man moved to Costa Rica and opened a coffee shop. One guy went back to school to become a therapist. They all found their way, eventually, just not the way they expected. It was almost 2 p.m. when I finally left the building. Frank walked me down to the lobby. Thank you, I said, for the tea, for the conversation, for all of this. Thank you for showing up, Frank replied, and for being willing to have a real conversation with an old man. Will I see you again? Building's being demolished in 2 months. After that, I'll be fully retired. But Joseph, you don't need me. You just needed someone to ask you the right questions. Now, you can ask them yourself. We shook hands, and I walked out into the afternoon sunlight, feeling like I'd been in that building for much longer than 5 hours. Over the next 2 weeks, I did something I hadn't done in months. I stopped applying for jobs I didn't want. Instead, I reached out to the nonprofit on Frank's card. I had a phone interview, then an in-person meeting. The position was exactly as Frank had described: content editor, managing their communications, telling stories about their literacy programs. The pay was $42,000 a year, significantly less than I'd been making. But when they offered me the position, I accepted without hesitation. I also started writing again. Real writing, not marketing copy. Essays about work and purpose, and the lies we tell ourselves about success. I submitted a few to online publications. To my surprise, one got accepted.
6 weeks after my interview at Atlas Solutions, I went back to 427 Weston Avenue. I wanted to thank Frank again, to tell him that I'd taken his advice, that things were changing. But when I arrived, the building was gone. Just a cleared lot, bare earth, no sign that a 70-year-old structure had stood there for decades. I called the number Frank had given me, but it went to voicemail. I left a message, but he never called back. But I had the photo I'd taken that day. Standing with Frank on the 9th floor terrace, the city spread out behind us. I had the business card. I had the memory of that conversation that had changed everything. And I had a new understanding. That sometimes getting lost is how we find our way. That sometimes the thing we think we need, a job, an interview, a concrete answer, isn't what we actually need at all. Sometimes we need someone to ask us the right questions, to give us permission to want something different, to remind us that all the urgent, important things we're chasing are just dust eventually. And the only thing that really matters is whether we're living honestly. I don't know who sent me that email. I don't know if Frank's theory about the building having a memory was real or just a beautiful metaphor. I don't know if that man was a real janitor. I don't know if any of it was supernatural or just a series of coincidences that felt meaningful because I needed them to be. But I know that I showed up for a job interview that didn't exist, and I left with something much more valuable than a job. I left with clarity, with permission, with a reminder that my life was mine to build, not according to what I thought I should want, but according to what actually made me feel alive. The building is gone now. Frank is retired somewhere, I hope, enjoying the life he chose after 60 years of living someone else's version of success. But the conversation remains. The questions remain. The perspective from that 9th floor terrace remains. And I carry them with me every day. Am I living honestly? Am I chasing what I actually want or what I think I'm supposed to want? When everything else turns to dust, will I be glad I spent my time this way? Those questions saved my life. And I found them in the most unlikely place, an abandoned building with a janitor who understood that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone at a crossroads is invite them in for tea and ask them who they really are. Have you ever found wisdom in an unexpected place? Share your story in the comments below. If this story about life-changing conversations, finding clarity, and learning that the path you're supposed to take isn't always the right one touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more meaningful stories every day. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss our next thought-provoking tale. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.